Welcome to Meet Me at the Wall. A podcast exploring author Anne Goodwin's time-traveling journey after discovering hundreds of letters written to her grandmother over a century ago. We visit the space where fact meets fiction, truth fosters imagination, and delve into the past while keeping an eye on how lessons from history affect us today and even tomorrow. Here we are. Welcome to Meet Me at the Wall, and thank you for joining us once again. This is a bittersweet episode, I have to say, because it's the last episode with Anne's sketches.
Yes.
For the 1920s.
For the 1920s, and then so much bonus material to go through. So
I know 9 and 10 are going to be a blast as well, but I just have to say there's something about how the sketches anchor us in the story of Florence that I think I'm going to miss. So, anything new going on?
Well, I came across something that popped up that sort of weaves us back to something we were talking about, and something I discovered at our fabulous local independent bookstore, Inkling Books in East Troy.
Right.
And Kayleen has the New Yorker cartoons, greeting cards. And so I came across this one. This is one I wish we really did have a camera in the studio, but I'll try to explain it. But I'm going to show it to you, Doug, and then you can read it.
Let me get my cheaters on here. Okay. There's a picture of St. Peter at the pearly gates with a gentleman trying to get in, I think. And the caption says, "And here are those family photos you thought you lost in the cloud."
So the picture shows a picture of big old albums that we have in our lifetime that nobody makes anymore because everything goes to the cloud. So I thought that was a great little nudge that the New Yorker agrees with us that we are losing hard copy. So.
We are definitely losing hard copy. And the other thing that's interesting is, so we've been traveling through the 1920s, and I was thinking about decade ends and the fact that they're often pretty exciting, like we're getting to the end of a decade. It's different than just a new year. It's a decade, right? And I was thinking, here we are in the 1920s. Well, at the end of the 1920s, this is foreshadowing a bit about the sketches today, it wasn't quite a joyous time.
Well, the roar was ending.
The roar was ending in October of 1929.
And it ended with the thud.
Was the crash.
Correct.
And so I was thinking about that, and by no means of the scale at all, but I was also thinking maybe 1999 going into 2000, there was a lot of apprehension about Y2K. I mean, it was it had the whole world in turmoil of what was going to happen. So very different kind of potential glitch, but the 1920s really did end on a big downbeat.
Mm-hmm. And what's interesting, they also started from a big downbeat.
Yeah.
They started post-World War I and post-pandemic Spanish flu. So they just came out of the gate roaring, as they say, the roaring 20s. And I wondered, would our 20s roar?
There's definitely stuff going on in our 20s.
Correct. And I don't know that we're roaring sort of in the same way. So
we'll have to think of a term for it, right?
Yes.
Well, continuing on our research, in the first third of these podcasts, we've been talking about some of the research, how you've discovered things. And I was thinking about, we realized heading into this that we've given Betsy a lot of homework. And I pre-checked if I should ask if she's done her homework, and the answer was...
the dog ate it.
Yeah, exactly. So, but the things that we do continue researching, that it could take years to figure some of these things out. Ted's writings, his sketches.
Right.
I would love to hear Ted's sketches compared to what you're writing. What are they like? What were they like back then?
I don't know that we'll ever know.
It's a mystery.
It's intriguing. It is definitely intriguing. And we're so looking forward to Betsy solving all of our mysteries.
Right. Another door is going to open.
Were there any lessons that you've learned from doing the research? Anything that you would pass along to listeners as far as how you dig into a project like this?
One piece of advice I would give after 2.5 years on this, push the print button every time you find something, because sometimes it's hard to recreate your search when you don't exactly remember the details. Print it.
Print it and file it and get a Dewey Decimal System going, right, for
Yes.
how to find everything.
we'll have to learn from ourselves then. Because
Right.
we certainly do.
You have to
A simple
teach
notebook
yourselves.
will do.
We were just going to do index cards.
Yeah, right. Anne, can you think of anything?
Well, I think I talked about it a little bit earlier in one of the previous episodes, but it was just keep looking and relooking at what you have, because as you become more informed, things gain context.
Oh, sure.
And so every time we revisit something, we are surprised by something that didn't mean anything before, but now does. And so it's ongoing.
And you've described that happening, but I don't think you've put it really as advice yet. So that's a really good point.
I'm just learning it as I go along because it surprises me every time.
Yeah, it's been a really cool process where we started with just reading these letters. And so we internalize bits and pieces from those letters. And then when we go and do more research and we find newspaper articles and documents and war registration information, those synapses start jumping and connecting, and a real story emerges.
Mm-hmm.
And probably the most exciting part for me has been finding people. So reaching out, and it is not an open world today. So far people don't want random emails saying, was your grandmother born in such and such year? And what's your social security number? That's sort of how people treat strange requests. And so we are so lucky that we've gotten wonderful responses and have now become friends with descendants of my grandparents. And that just amazes me. But then there is also the flip side where we reached out to one of the grandsons from a woman who was on the wall, and he was so suspicious. Why are you contacting me? I am so and so, attorney at law. And I said, well, I have a picture of the telegram announcing your birth to let you know that I have objects that you might want your grandmother's letters. And I realized afterwards that maybe not everybody had a great relationship with their grandmother. And so by me bringing up her name to him, there was no joy, curiosity, interest. It was a big wall. And I realized that the woman who was my grandmother's friend later in life had issues. And so I wonder if we touched something that he didn't want to visit. So when you find connections to people that you can share history with, that's been the most rewarding to me. And I would suggest do it even though it's kind of scary because you don't know what kind of response you're going to get.
Well, and what's really interesting about that is that you're talking about people who are not related to you. These are descendants of your grandparents' friends.
Exactly.
And that's, I think, a step that people don't often take. They're very focused on this relative and this relative by marriage or not, or all of these different nuances, but not the friends.
And what was interesting in our unique situation is that all of the letters I have are written to my grandmother. So I had a bundle of letters from her dear friend Shiny Mountcastle, and I knew many things about Frank Mountcastle before I met him. He's our friend who we will call in our bonus
one of our bonus episodes, we're going to pull Frank on the phone.
Right. So what's fascinating is that I end up knowing things about the people who we've reached out to meet before I've even met them. Mm-hmm. And then I'm able to share some things about their childhood that they either didn't remember or touch something that they did recall.
Wow.
And then we're able to describe it further. So it's sort of a mutual gift.
The one piece that's missing, though, are the letters that Flo wrote to them.
I know.
So if anybody out there in listenerland has a letter
from Florence June Westgate, Florence Crawford, exactly. I'm craving those letters because Shiny wrote to my grandmother, we must keep all of our letters. And I think what happened is somebody just took care of stuff and threw stuff away. And
which you really couldn't blame them for. I mean, that certainly happens. And
who wants those letters from?
Right.
Exactly.
The letters to Shiny, we're pretty sure, do not survive.
They did not survive.
Okay. Is there still a chance that Maeve has some
We're
letters?
hoping.
Okay.
We're hoping.
Okay.
So we'll see. And there are a couple other people who we have yet to reach out to as for Descendants. And I don't know if we will. I think that the information we have is all going to be inputting to Florence instead of her output. at this point.
Maybe someday.
I was just thinking about, we've been talking about this word ephemera and ephemeral, and how these letters that were meant to be ephemeral or fleeting or just of the time are really long-standing. And thank goodness.
They are. That's true. In fact, Anne, you sent an article this morning that was about two women who had a lifelong friendship.
And written notes between them.
And written notes between them. They went back to like when they were 10 years old or something.
Yes, now they're 70.
They're 70, and they're reliving their whole history together right now. It's beautiful.
It is. It was great to run across that this morning and think, oh my gosh, there's a story of a collection of letters and people reliving history and connecting with their dear friends. So it was fun to see.
Hey, Anne, when you were in high school, did you pass notes to your friends?
Oh, yes.
That was a big thing, wasn't
it? I did too. Oh, yeah.
Did you? I wasn't sure if
folded
the
up
boys,
in the whole little shapes.
It was how they were
triangle.
folded that was so
The
special.
folding was really cool. Yeah.
They probably don't do that anymore.
Probably not.
They probably just text.
If they can have phones at school.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that was kind of like contraband at the time. We weren't supposed to be writing notes in class, right?
No. And the fact that this friendship partnership, these two women saved those notes.
Right.
Like from the first note passed in a hallway.
Right.
Quite a treasure.
And I think they mused in the article, the woman who wrote it mused, will someone decades from now or 70 years from now discover these letters? Will they still be here? The fun thing is, we talked about this right in episode 1, these letters have survived 100+ years. Many of them, you've got some from the 1800s even.
Hey, have you heard of this movie? It's called Wicked Little Letters.
No.
Tim and I watched it over the weekend, and it's a British film, or 2023, I think it was made, and it's about this little town, seaside town in England, where the people of the town start receiving these letters anonymously that are just foul and wicked, and accusing them of all manner of atrocities. And come to find out after watching this film, which was great, and I really recommend you guys watch it, it was a true story.
It's a true
Oh,
story.
I love true story movies. That's always my favorite.
Okay, don't tell us anymore.
I won't.
That's why I love your sketches so much, because they're largely true story. I mean, we've done all this fact or historical fiction throughout these 8 episodes, and so much of it is true, or a nugget of truth, as you like to say.
Yes. Yes, we've said fact more than fiction.
We've said fact. We'll have to go back and tally it up, but it's been interesting. So, Anne, starting to lead up to the sketches now, have you written any for the next decade or anything like that? Anything starting to spark yet? Or are we going to have a little bit of a pause, do you think, between seasons?
I'm starting to think while I'm swimming.
Good. Yes. And it's a nice year for swimming.
But it's interesting. I'm so attached to the 20s, the 30s, and 40s just aren't calling yet. And I realized that it's moving forward with the girls and all of their lives. And there's tragedy, and there's obviously the 30s, very, very difficult decade. And then we have World War II coming up. So I don't know if I just don't want to jump into all of the challenges that I know these 2 decades presented. And so I am just so happy to be doing this podcast instead of writing about the 30s right now.
I would summarize sketches last time as basically being the highs and lows for Walter, which was flying and crashing, and the highs and lows for Florence, because it just came off the wedding, and then we went into the birth of the 2 children and some ups and downs there, as well as, of course, the fundraiser and switching churches at the very end. Well, I'm dying to hear what comes next here as we wind down the 1920s. Take it away, Anne.
A Worthwhile Life, at Home, Southern Pines, North Carolina, April 1929. Greetings, my sweet. Ben saunters through the living room and out the French doors to the red brick patio, where he finds Florence tucked in the corner amidst a profusion of North Carolina tall pines, blooming dogwood, and a brilliant montage of intersecting azalea and camellia. The sandhills spring in all its glory. She beckons him with her hand and starts to speak, but Ben is already talking as he approaches. We shot even par today. Walter signed a note on a napkin apologizing for being such a bum partner. I made it official with him. Told him I will not consider going pro until I beat Bobby. If I can't beat Bobby Jones, then I have no business being a golf professional. Florence smiles, although with eyebrows furrowed. I'm so sorry you're frustrated, darling, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. We need to go home to Titusville. I got word today from Anna that Mother is failing and not willing to tell me. She does not want us to cut our time here short, but I'm afraid we must go and plan to go through D.C. and pick up Marion along the way. I'm going in to start packing. 3 days later, Florence and Marion stand at the foot of their mother's bed, each hoping fervently that when Lou's eyes open, she will recognize them. Maybe we should each grab a hand and see if that helps her stir. Marion starts down one side and Florence the other. Louise's eyes open as each grab her hand. Florence grasps tighter. Oh, Mama, I'm so sorry we didn't get here sooner. If only we had known. Marion started. Oh, Mama, you were so right. I love school, and I'm so happy to be there, but I missed all this time with you. Louise Rouse Westgate, staunch and notable suffragette, prolific writer, endless community servant, the one who represents resolve and strength through whatever door she passes, can only muster the strength to squeeze one hand at a time. She turns her head and looks towards Florence. Please do not fret. You have been the most devoted daughter, my sweet. Both Papa and I have been blessed by your tender love and care. Florence bows her head, willing her tears not to fall, and Lou continues. But now it's time for you to turn all that love and devotion to your family as a good wife to Benjamin and a devoted mother to sweet Nancy and dear Dickie. The biggest gift and greatest honor is motherhood. You must be present. It all goes by so quickly. Florence raises her head and nods solemnly. Lou drifts away again. The sisters look across the bed with questioning eyes, and then Lou twists slightly and turns her head to face her youngest daughter. Mimi, I'm so sorry I'm going to miss all the wonderful events and people in life waiting for you. Promise me you will protect and keep that positive, happy spirit intact, whatever you choose and wherever you go. It's your greatest gift. Mimi reaches over and kisses her cheek and then rests her head on her mother's chest. I promise, Mama. Anna shuffles in with a tray holding a bowl of water and some ice chips. Girls, why don't you take a break? I have some tending to do to make Mrs. Westgate more comfortable, and then we'll let her rest a bit. You go to the kitchen and we'll find you something to eat. Later, Florence returns to Louise's makeshift receiving room in the front parlor, where she's basking in the late afternoon amber light. It soothes her to be in the middle of the household bustle and to know visitors will not be inconvenienced with flights of stairs. The Presbyterian elders just left, leaving behind the city of Titusville's proclamation honoring the legacy of Louise's long-serving gifts to her community. She starts to fade after the last caller passes through the door, but brightens when she sees Florence enter the room. Oh, good child, I'm glad you are here. I have something for you. She nods to the small bedside table holding a leather-bound book etched with a gold American Oil Works emblem. Florence gasps, That's your hostess journal. It's her mother's entertainment log. Every event Louise hosted or attended chronicled in great detail. Dates, guests, menus, themes, venues, her lists endless. Florence, I want you to keep this and fill in the rest of the pages starting today. You'll find it quite helpful as a hostess when you want to remember or review what occurred in the past. Keep a good record and it will serve you well. I think I have just hosted my last event. Please make a note. Anna made tea sandwiches and some scones. Lou smiles gently and glances sideways towards the journal. Florence picks up the worn book, leather soft and corners curling, and reaches to stroke her mother's cheek. Oh, Mama, I'll take good care of this always, but I'll never hold a candle to you. I'll make sure your chicken salad and sunshine cake are always front and center. Oh, no, dear. You make your own way and find your own signature favorites. Those are old news. Lou rests a moment and then starts again with effort. I need you to please do one more thing. All my notes and completed writings are in the armoire upstairs in the guest room. Please make sure they are in your possession and move with you wherever you go. Your children's children may benefit from reading firsthand the tumultuous times we are navigating through. Now I must rest. That evening, Ben walks past the makeshift nursery set up in the Westgate home as the sisters tend to their mother, and is surprised to see Florence sitting on the floor, Nancy next to her with a picture book in her hand, and Dickie rocking on the wooden horse to the side. "Hello, darling." Florence pauses from reading the names under the colorful pictures of animals at the zoo. "I've been thinking. I don't think it's time for us to plan that cruise this summer. Let's just plan to stay in Titusville. I have a hankering to stay home. Be a lamb and let the Critchlows know another time, please." And without skipping a beat, Florence looks down at Nancy and asks, "What does a lion say?" The Shop and Drop, New York City, October 29th, 1929. "Shiny, isn't it just our dumb luck that the store seems almost empty today?" Florence and Shiny stand in the elevator, brass doors closing, as they head down to women's coats, the last floor of the day purveying each department of Macy's flagship Manhattan store. "I'm just dying for a new coat to carry me into winter. Let's see if our luck remains and we have the floor to ourselves." "That's the one, Flossie Belle." Shiny nods her head in approval as Florence twirls in front of a three-way mirror, pirouetting a dark green wool driving coat. "It's just the ticket." Florence stops and looks at her watch. "You know, you keep looking. I'll buy this coat and meet you at the telephone in front of the elevator. I want to check in with Ben and tell him about our successes today. I'm sure I'll be quick with no line. Yoo-hoo if you find something." Florence waits as the phone starts to ring and is surprised to hear Ben answer before it rings a second time. "Florence, where are you? I've been leaving messages at the hotel all day." "Oh, Benj, Shiny and I have had the most marvelous day. Macy's has been a complete dream, our own private store. And to top things off, I found the most perfect car coat, just the one I've been hankering for." "Florence, return the coat. Haven't you heard the absolute bottom has fallen out of the market? We're going to be lucky to keep our house. People are jumping out of windows in the city." "Oh, Benj, I will not. It's just a coat. Don't be silly." And with that, Florence hangs up the phone. That evening, over what can only be called a grim gin cocktail, Shiny and Florence ruminate over the chaos that surrounds them post-crash. Their bags are packed for the night train. They stop at Macy's right before closing time, and Florence goes back to women's coats. "I need to return this coat, please. It seems that the fit is just not quite right." A Fond Farewell, Titusville Cemetery, 1978. The cars start to pull away from the gravesite after the first few fistfuls of dirt hit my grandfather's coffin. I am pleased to have made it in time. The friendly skies did not delay my arrival coming cross-country from California. I look around the departing crowd and the few remaining family members who are conversing with well-wishers. I realize it is good to die in the home where you were born. The roots grow deep, and loss is eased by the gift of shared memories. My eyes roam and rest on a lone gentleman standing off to the side, leaning heavily on a cane. He is dressed in a suit and tie and stands erect, facing the gravesite, hat in hand. I walk towards him, smile, and hold out my hand. "Hello, my name is Anne. I am Mr. and Mrs. Crawford's granddaughter. Welcome. Would you like to come closer?" "No, thank you, miss. My arthritis in my hip is telling me I've come far enough along. I just wanted to pay my respects to Mr. Crawford." "Can you tell me your name, please, sir, and how you came to know my grandpa?" The man put his hat back on, extended his hand, and said, "My name is Jeffrey Stone, miss." And he continued with a little smile, "I knew your grandmother before she knew your grandfather. Might have had a little something to do with their coming together, so to speak." "Jeffrey Stone? As in Mr. Jeffrey the Pullman porter?" "Yes, miss, for over 40 years. I had to retire when my hip started talking to me." "Oh, I've heard all about you, especially the comment you made when you first discovered that my grandparents were newlyweds. My grandmother's favorite story to tell." "The last time I saw Mr. Crawford was when they were on their auto tour south, and they stopped by Howard University to attend our daughter Belle's graduation. We have them to thank for that. My Belle is now a civil rights attorney, and all that started with a gift they gave me years ago. And I was smart enough to follow Mr. Crawford's advice. Yes, sir, I did. Mr. Jeffrey, did you know that my grandmother is still alive and is sitting right over there in the blue Skylark? She's waiting for me to drive her home. Would you like to come say hello? Well, my hip can't stop me from making that trip. And with that, we lock arms and slowly pick our path towards my grandmother.
Thank you, Anne. The last of the sketches. They will be missed.
For 1920s.
For 1920s. Okay, good. Now, I just want to clarify one little fact. When you let off, you're talking about the golf and the bum partner. Was that Walter, their friend, or Walter, the golf professional?
Oh, that was Walter Hagen.
Walter Hagen, that's
right.
Okay.
Who was a peer of my grandfather's, and Bobby Jones was a peer of my grandfather's, and they played golf together, and my grandfather wouldn't go pro because he couldn't beat Bobby.
Couldn't beat Bobby.
But for all those golf enthusiasts out there.
I love it. Well, that is quite a touching bunch of episodes with Luis's passing, and that's about when it happened in April of 1929.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. 7 years past her husband's passing, and she lived with my grandparents in Titusville until she passed away.
It's time for fact or historical fiction. So there could be a lot of fact or historical fiction questions here, but the one I wanted to touch on is the shopping trip on October 29th, 1929. Is there any evidence that they actually went shopping on the day of the crash?
Total truth.
That's truth?
Total truth.
Okay, I would have figured you came up with that as a nice little storyline.
No. Shiny and Florence were shopping to their heart's content on the day it crashed, totally clueless that it happened. And it was a phone call to my grandfather that let them know that their happy day was done.
Okay, how did you know this?
Again, oral folklore.
Okay.
It was a story
so
my
this
grandmother
is the oral
loved
side.
to tell. I mean,
my goodness.
It was quite a moment in history. So do you remember where you were when? Mm-hmm. She knew exactly where she was when the stock market crashed.
Not fun, but certainly...
It gives an image of the day,
it does.
As far as an empty department store.
Absolutely.
Because everybody was in a panic.
Take the coat back.
Mm-hmm.
Take the coat back. I don't know if I made up whether she returned the coat or not, though.
Well,
I don't
that
remember.
Could be. It's a minor detail at this point.
I kind of feel like she might have kept it.
She might have.
Lou is more prominent in this episode, and we keep talking about moving forward into the 30s and 40s, and I'm really looking forward to stepping back and researching more about this woman. She was really amazing. She was a suffragette. She was part of an effort to educate others about women's rights and women's need to be able to vote, and a very powerful, talented, creative woman.
That is going to be the prequel series.
Right. I'm ready to go there.
Yeah,
now.
I know. We got to keep with the girls, though, because
yes, we do.
That's the prequel, and we look forward to all that research.
Prequel season.
That's the prequel season.
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
We have large ambitions here. Definitely have large ambitions.
It does make me think about the end of her life, though. Lou's life. After she lost her husband and they lost their fortune, what were her last years like?
They were well taken care of by my grandparents.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So that was one of the wonderful aspects of choosing Ben Crawford, is that he was a very, very generous person and took care of his wife's family. And I think an aunt lived with him as well, and Aunt Minnie. We'll find out more when we discover more about that era of the late 1800s and before 1920.
Well, and didn't Lou, during that time, buy a car? Wasn't there a letter about her buying herself a car? Which was pretty unusual at that time for a woman to drive.
An older woman.
An older woman, but then also to have her own automobile.
Yes. I do believe there is. I maybe will be able to find it. I remember in my grandmother's journal a note about her first driving lesson, and her brother Ted said, just don't run over any pile of manure because there might be a nail in it.
Ouch.
I also remember a story about my grandmother driving where they used to have these metal policemen in the middle of the road with an arm up to stop. And she was driving my grandfather's car he was sitting next to her, and she knocked the guy over, the metal guy
the metal
over. She
policeman?
just knocked him over and kept going as if nothing happened. So she didn't say anything, and he didn't say anything, and, the guy's flat on the ground. Not a word.
Was that like an alternative to a stop sign?
Yes.
Yeah, I wonder how the mechanics of that worked.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't you think the car would have been injured?
You would think so.
Maybe it was just a bumper. Maybe it was a bumper that took it out.
I'm curious. You've read a lot of letters from Flo's friends to Flo during these 20s that you really enjoyed. So what kinds of things were they dealing with? Can you think of some of the things that they would write her about?
Having babies.
Sure, they were having babies at the time, right?
Getting married, that was a big theme. Travel was a big theme.
Yes, and all the conversations, a lot of it was raising young families and who was doing what. And
comparing notes.
And comparing notes and trying to get together, figuring out where they could meet. As the 20s went deeper into the 20s and things started to get tighter, there's letters starting more early in the 30s, but how belts needed to start tightening and life was changing. So we see a little bit of that in the end of the 20s with the shop and drop. But just as we do today, they talked about their everyday lives and what was important to them at the time and how they were managing, and no different than how we communicate with what's going on with our life. A lot of mundane information that just is a way to be connected.
And there was also an element of them passing on information from other mutual friends. So you would learn about Shiny from a letter that wasn't written by Shiny, but maybe written by Kay.
Right. They all stayed very well connected.
So I think for us, as we look forward to the couple of bonus episodes that are going to follow, we're going to try to bring you some different things and in a little different format, hopefully dial in some of the Descendants and really have a great time, continue this ride to wrap up season 1.
Looking forward to next time.
Yeah, we all are. Thank you for listening, and we will see you in just a short while again. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
See you. Oh, what's the cookie?
Oh, today's cookie. So this is my favorite cookie that I like to eat just right out of the freezer. The dough.
This is your dough cookie.
This is my dough cookie. I roll them up into a log, and so it's a wonderful recipe from a hotel in Door County, and it is oatmeal, Heath bar, chocolate chunk walnut.
Oh, bye-bye.
So, all right. Thanks, everyone. Meet Me at the Wall is hosted by Doug Martinet, Anne Goodwin, and Betsy Schmeeken. Music is written and performed by Alex Vance. This podcast is copyright 2025 by Pleasurable Pause Press. Thank you for listening, and we hope you tune in again next time.